Chris Boyer, and this is a video response for PE 582, Critical Thinking, Application, Research Problems in Our Vocation, a discussion for week 2. So for this discussion, the purpose of this discussion is to help us as candidates for our masters in PE to be able to identify a problem for our research paper and be able to write a better problem and identify more narrow parameters and make sure there's a good comparison, something that's quantifiable. And so from our book, our assigned text, Practical Research by Leedy and Ormrod, I was reading through the bullet points in chapter 2, and there were some things that stood out to me as I read it. And page 37, it says, state the problem or question in a way that reflects an open mind about its solution. So approaching coaching, and what I would like to see is I would like to find a problem that exists in the sport of water polo, or a question that I have in the sport of water polo. And so be able to identify it with an open mind and not already with a conclusion. I think that in some ways in water polo we can say, oh, this works or that, or as a coach, as an A-type personality, we come to a place where we have a very definitive view about what is better. This is a better practice than that practice. I think it's a good idea as we approach this research problem to really look at something, because in the sport of water polo, you could grow in one area, say strength, but it actually affects your quickness. Or you can grow in size, and it helps you to be able to wrestle in the water in a duel, and so you get stronger, you get bigger, you're able to push people around, but then it affects your ability to go up and down the pool as long. So you have a harder time, and your heart rate starts getting a lot higher, lactic acid buffering starts diminishing, and people start really slowing down over time. So those are some effects that can happen. They have converse effects depending on what you're going to focus on. So as a coach, there's some questions that I have, and in this study I want to approach it in a way that's unbiased as I state the problem. And on page 35 of our text, bullet point number 1 says, describe your problem or question clearly and completely, and it gives an example like welfare on children's attitudes. So I did that for the sport of water polo. I want to investigate explosive versus strength training for water polo players. So that is my problem. And to state it in another way, in this study, I will contrast the effects of Olympic lifting versus powerlifting on the sport of water polo. What I'm trying to answer is what's going to be more effective for the game of water polo, or even what are the effects if they increase, say, shot velocity. Does that slow them down in the long run? If they do this certain type of conditioning training or fitness training, strength training, is that going to affect their ability to wrestle in the water? So I want to see what the relationships are. And so I have found one study on this, and it was in a study done on elite water polo players in Spain, and that's where I got the idea to address this problem. So as I looked at this body of research, I found that this study showed that 2 strength training sessions per week done in a powerlifting manner, just basically focusing on deadlift, squatting, and bench pressing, the 3 areas of measurement between the study groups were their 20-meter all-out sprint, their shot velocity in miles per hour, and then shot velocity, vertical leap, shot velocity, and 20-meter sprint. And so those were the 3 areas that were what the measurement was going to be between, and to show improvement if it improved any of those. So the study showed that strength training clearly increased all 3 of those areas, improved, which is great to know. So what I want to look at is if explosive training, so using a high velocity, low volume type of movement like snatch and clean and jerk, will increase that more. So I would like to study that versus a powerlifting technique using a high volume, low velocity approach. I want to find out which one of those approaches is going to show greater improvement. And so between two study groups, I would like to create a study that's going to look at the effects on a water polo player, in particular in their area of their 20-meter sprint, their shot velocity, and vertical leap, and compare that to the powerlifting group. So the Olympic group versus the powerlifting group, and see which one has greater improvement. I think another area that I would like to include in this study is the effect on their, say, 10-100s on the 2 minutes. So I call it a T1000, but I don't think that's what everybody calls it. But for the purpose of the study, I'll call it a T1000, which is basically a timed 1000, that they're going to go all out for 10-100s, and we will test which one of these slows down more. So I have my predictions of what's going to happen to every one of those areas. I'm not quite sure with the shot velocity, vertical leap. I think shot velocity and vertical leap are going to, actually, I think all areas are going to be improved more through Olympic lifting than powerlifting. I think if someone trains solely on Olympic lifts, those high velocity, low volume movements are going to show greater significance on their improvement than the strength-based movements. So another area that could be tested, but I don't have a good way to test it yet, would be the strength. When people are just fighting each other in the water, dueling, they call it dueling. So when two players are fighting each other, their leg strength and overall body strength, that might come into question, that powerlifting may show greater benefit than Olympic lifting. But I'm not sure, because there's just a lot of underwater movements that are happening, that you're using your hands, you're using your arms, you're using your feet in order to create propulsion against someone else. So I'm not really sure on that one if strength would be better or if Olympic lifting would be better. So that's the study that I would like to investigate. That's the problem: explosive versus strength training for water polo players. So I'm excited to see feedback, and I'm sure that this isn't entirely thought through, or maybe it's too wide of a study, or impractical to be able to study. But based on the body of research that I've seen, I feel like it is possible to do in a relatively small group of players, and be able to test and see which one is showing greater benefit. So thank you for your time. I'm looking forward to seeing your responses. Take care.